Are you
Just as I
right-handed
sit
too?
down, he's going to bang the
I can
gavel,
take it off the
stand
when
up,
I'm
and say
home.
the Pledge of Allegiance.
Because then I sit and
No, because it won't work. She said she was gonna break the 44 kids out into 4 groups. So that won't work.
Whoa.
Is that you, Turner?
Hello. How are you?
Is that bad, Mike?
I think this one is too. I now call this committee of the whole, the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm just gonna leave that back. All right, the first item up is preschool data review. I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
So with us today, we have our preschool team, and we're going to give you a little bit of an overview, background of our preschool program along with our data. Lisa Stevenson is the evaluator program oversight for preschool. And so her and her team are here today. We have Tiffany Stallcup is the principal at Children's Village, and Stacy Struck is our early childhood specialist. So these are the leaders of our preschool initiative in Davenport. Thank you. Lisa.
Thank you. And we have a slideshow to share with you here tonight too. Very similar to other previous COW presentations. We have data to look at and information to share. And as TJ mentioned, at the very beginning, we're going to do a little bit of front loading of what is the Davenport Early Childhood and Preschool Program, because we know some of our board members are newer, and maybe for those of you that are not newer too, just catching you up on all of the changes that have taken place over the last couple years at the Children's Villages, at our satellite preschool sites in the elementary schools, and at our private partners. And then we'll have time for questions at the end.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Stallcup, the principal, like TJ said. So we're just going to start the presentation. This is our staff. We had a whole staff meeting with some training at the beginning of the year, and we were so large we had to get a spot at the AEA because I have so many staff. So I thought that was we learned a lot, and there's a lot of people there. So according to the 2022 Iowa Urban Education Network, children that attend statewide quality preschool are 25% less likely to drop out of school, 40% less likely to become a teen parent, 50% less likely to be placed in special education after preschool, 60% more likely to attend college, and 70% less likely to be arrested for a violent crime. So today we are going to go through some background and participation rates in preschool. We're going to look at the preschool assessments, just to kind of let you know what they are and what they look like, some future goals, and then we're going to look at data. So our sites. So we have two self-contained, I would call them early learning sites in the district. So our largest is Children's Village West, which is right next to the Putnam Museum. And there we have about 256 students was our enrollment when I did this presentation. We have 20 certified teachers and a lot of different programming that go into that. So we have 7 special education teachers just at that one site, 8 teachers that teach full day classes, and 4 that teach half day. And then we do have a TLCS innovator that serves all of the village sites, and 33 paraeducators in that one building. And then our other self-contained site is Children's Village Hoover, which is down by the East Village. And they have that wide variety of programming as well. They have about 120, 117 kiddos that go down there. And those sites serve both 3 and 4-year-olds, full day, half day. We have AM wrap, so kiddos can get dropped off about 7 o'clock in the morning. And then we do have stepping stones after school, so they can be there as late as 5:30. Both of these sites are also DHS licensed, so that opens up some funding resources and opportunities for our families that go there as well. A barrier for our families that go to all of our sites is transportation and then just that full day care. So even our full day classrooms are 8 to 2 o'clock. So that 2 o'clock to whenever families get off of work is kind of a barrier for enrollment, I would say. Our next site is what we call a satellite site. So these are sites that are in our elementary buildings. So at these sites, we have one teacher and one paraeducator, and they can have 20 students at each of those sites. They are all statewide voluntary, so that means they have to be 4 by September 15th and meet that criteria. So these are all 4-year-olds, and they're only half-day programs. This year we did, 2 years ago, I suppose, when 6th grade came back, we were in more than 4 elementary buildings, but with 6th grade coming back, just the space, we did have to collapse some of those programs.
Tiffany, Tiffany's got a spot in the presentation where you can ask your questions too. So if you do have questions along the way, make sure you're gathering them, and then I think you have maybe a spot or two where there can be questions.
Yep.
Sorry for the interruption.
No, you're fine, thank you. Yeah, this year we did kind of put together a satellite site preschool principal meeting that we meet once a month as principals, just to be on the same page about early learning standards and what our kiddos should be learning compared to kindergartners and what our different standards are. So that has been a good kind of balance and flow for those different sites. The next type of site we have are partner sites. So these are community partners. We have 14 of them. So they are in our statewide voluntary preschool program. And these partner sites vary in size from one class of 20, because that's the maximum size of a statewide voluntary, up to one of our largest site has 55 preschoolers. So with these sites, we are responsible for holding them to the Iowa Quality Preschool Programming Standards, and we report that through our desk audit to the state. And they also have to sign an annual agreement that they adhere to those quality standards, and then they report to us their quarterly expenditures, and we ensure that their funding is used appropriately. So these partner sites are a benefit to our community. They increase our available 4-year-old spots. They also increase the standard or the quality of the programming that they have to be. So statewide voluntary preschools have to have a licensed teacher and also highly qualified paras. They have to have evidence-based curriculum, and all of ours use our curriculum for their learning. They have to have indoor and outdoor environments that meet those quality standards. And then they also have the opportunity, and they're invited to all of our professional development at the district level. So we invite them to our Wednesday PDs, our in services, and things like that. Stacy's also providing them some training over the summer as well, because obviously that's easier for their staff to get to. So this is our 4-year-old preschool enrollment, and I just want to note that we are the fourth largest in the state for our 4-year-old enrollment. So we currently have 339 4-year-olds enrolled in our Davenport schools programs. We have 412 enrolled in our partner sites, those community-based sites, for a total of 751 4-year-olds. In addition, we do have those 3-year-olds at our Children's Village sites here in the district, but when we're looking at 4-year-olds going into kindergarten, we're at about 751, where our current kindergarten enrollment, which is the last bar you see there, currently is 1,024. So you can see we still have kind of a gap in being able to serve eligible 4-year-olds before they enter kindergarten. So this is just some enrollment data that compares preschool to just the entire district itself. And I just wanted to include this. I think we pride ourselves and our teachers do a great job with being inclusive in the classroom and having a very diverse population and providing that nurturing environment for their students to grow.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the early childhood special education programs that we offer. We have a unique relationship as with K-12 buildings. The students that they serve for special education are typically found eligible within that school setting, either by teacher referral or the student assistant team or team referrals. But all states across the country are responsible for providing services for children for birth to 3 through a program called Early Access here. And when those students are getting close to turning 3, they may begin a transition process where they may be found eligible for an IEP. And then we're responsible for providing them services in one of our preschool settings. So those students may turn 3 anytime during the year, which means we always need to make sure we have enough space available to serve those students. We also have the AA also has an early intervention team where they might work with students that are just in a home setting. They haven't gone to a preschool, but they come in with a referral from a doctor or a parent or so on. And then if they're found eligible, we are responsible for serving those students as well. Therefore, we've always got kind of a revolving door of who's coming into our programs. This year so far, we've found 78 students eligible from outside of the community, outside of our settings, that then we began to provide services for. And we currently have 17 meetings scheduled between now and June for additional students, and that may always change and raise as well. So we want to make sure we're prepared to have that seamless transition for them and make sure that they're ready to learn as soon as they turn 3 or are found eligible without the community. Because of that, we have a large population of special education students. So about a third of our students, of all of those numbers that Tiffany shared for our sites at Children's Village Hoover, Children's Village West, and those 4 elementary sites, about a third of those students do receive special education services. So it's a good chunk of our population. And of course, then we do have AEA support within our buildings as well to find students eligible there through our MTSS process as necessary. So that's a little background into our funding. So as you'll see, this is just a bar graph of the different ways that our budget is created to serve our students. So about 38% of our budget is funded by special education weighted funds, and that pays for the special education teachers. We have 10 of them throughout our sites. It pays for adaptive equipment. It pays for a portion of all of our paraeducators at our center sites as well. And then, of course, we have a wide continuum of services, as Tiffany hit on a little bit earlier. We have, the majority of our students are all integrated into our general education program, so we try to have a ratio of about 14 general educations to 6 special education students in a 4-year-old classroom. And again, just falling at about that 1/3. And then we have special education teachers that will either push into that classroom along with their general education teachers. They also meet weekly with the paras and the teachers to ensure that services are all on the same page. Some of those students may need to be pulled out into a quiet setting with that special education teacher in a group of 1 or 2, maybe 3 students at a time. And then, of course, at the opposite end of that continuum, we do have classrooms that only have special education students in them, and they require intensive modifications to the curriculum and adaptations to have those needs met. But those students then reverse integrate into our gen ed programs for as much of a day as possible, and we always try to increase that for full inclusion throughout that program as well. Our second funding source is Head Start. So we contract with Head Start. You guys probably are familiar with signing an annual contract with them. We currently contract with them to have 52 spots. So what that means is 52 of our full-day classroom spots are reserved for Head Start. We provide all the staff, all the curriculum, all the assessments, and do the work, but Head Start is responsible for recruiting those students, and then, of course, we have to make sure that we're following Head Start performance standards as well in those classrooms. So they fund for each child, it's $400 per month for each of those 52 spots. Then our second largest funding source is that statewide voluntary preschool, and we refer to that as SWVPP, and that's the state grant through Iowa. So the funding for each of those students is 0.5 of the per pupil rate, so approximately $3,600 for each of those students, but they have to be enrolled by October 1st to get that funding. So while we continue to enroll more students throughout the year, because students have left because of moving or what have you, or just parents didn't realize that preschool was an option and then found out about it, we continuously fill those spots as well, but we only get funded for those, again, that are enrolled by October 1st, and they have to be, have turned 4 by September 15th to receive that. Funding always is a year behind, so we will get the funding for this year's numbers next year. The funding we get this year is from the students we had last year, which of course was greatly impacted by COVID over the past 2 years too, so we'll talk about that a little bit. Our third largest funding source is Title, and that's just an off-the-top budget that we receive from the district for Title, and that pays for a percentage of our teachers and our paraeducators, as well as Title grant scholarships for students that meet income eligible criteria. It can pay for their tuition to come to school as well. The next one on this graph is parent tuition. And certainly we do accept just tuition from the families to pay for that. Again, all 4-year-olds are free in the half-day program, but if a parent wants a full-day program, they can pay that tuition. But also encompassed in this number is a different variety of scholarships that we receive. So because we're DHS licensed, families are eligible to apply for child care assistance if they're working at least 28 hours a week, going to school at least 13 hours a week, and then meet different income guidelines based on their family size. We also have scholarships through Early Childhood Iowa, and at each site they can give us up to $5,000 a month, so at Hoover and West. And we are at our max for scholarships for that. And then there's a few other small-based scholarships in that program as well, but for the majority, that's the child care assistance that funds that and the Early Childhood Iowa. Our fourth largest funding this year, for the first time ever, is through ESSER funds, which I'm sure you're all familiar with as well. But again, because of our budget deficits specifically due to COVID and just some funding issues over the last year, we would have had to cut approximately 7 classrooms this year, which would have obviously greatly decreased our program. So we have ESSER funds to cover that at about $600,000. And then our final funding source is the Wraparound Child Care Grant. That's a grant we apply for every 5 years. We're in our third year of that grant. We receive $78,000 each year for that, and that provides the funding for our staff to cover that AM wrap program that goes from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. It can also fund students if their main funding source is Head Start, Title grant funded, or special education. It can wrap around and pay for a full day of care for them, again, if they meet eligibility guidelines, and it can pay for that Stepping Stone program as well. So it's a small part of our budget, but we're lucky to have that grant, and it helps a lot of our families. So those are our major funding sources. So the goal of the board and the district for many years has been to provide at least 80% of eligible 4-year-olds in Davenport quality preschool experience. That's why we're so fortunate to have those community partner sites in addition to our sites, but as Tiffany mentioned, we are still falling short a little bit of that for 4-year-olds. It doesn't mean that they might not go to a home-based program or something like that, but they're not meeting those Iowa quality preschool programming standards. So we would like to increase that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation about some goals that we have to do that. But now I'm going to talk about the different assessments that we use at the preschool level. The first one that we use is Teaching Strategies Gold. That's a statewide assessment. All programs that are DHS licensed, statewide voluntary, Head Start, Early Childhood Special Ed are required to use Gold. So it's kind of like ISASP for your older students, but it's performed in quite a different manner. So it's a portfolio-based assessment. We take checkpoints. Oh, yep, you can go ahead and go, sorry. We take checkpoints 3 times per year. And the teachers are expected during each of those checkmark points to be collecting anecdotal data, observational data, pictures, videos, on-the-spot data, and then they're supposed to rate that at preliminary ratings throughout that checkpoint period so that by the time the finalization point comes, the first one comes in November, they're able to give a rating for that child. And students fall within color bands. So you can see the green band up there is the 3-year-old band, where the blue band is the 4-year-old band. So the students can be at a lot of different developmental levels and still fall within widely held age expectations for that band. And you can also see how the bands overlap. So while a student might be proficient as a 3-year-old in the middle of the 4-year-old band, there's a lot of skills that overlap. And teachers go through training on how to assess those skills. There are, you can see the different domains that we assess up there. There's a variety of them. There's 26 different objectives that we cover, and then there's lots of different dimensions under that. So there's about 143 things that teachers need to rate on for each student, each checkpoint. Peli is our universal screener. We did a beta testing when Peli was still in the works with the district starting back in 2012. and used it for many years while it was going through that research base. And so we got to do that kind of free of charge, and then we stopped using it for a while. We adopted it again last year. It's a great assessment to make sure that we are catching kids early that might not be meeting benchmarks. If you've been around the district long enough, it's written by the same company that did DIBELS, which used to be the universal screening measure for Davenport schools. It measures 4 areas for our 3 and 4-year-olds: alphabet knowledge, comprehension, vocabulary, and phonological awareness. The research on this is based on benchmarks scores or cut points for risk. So it's a nice little database. It gives us red, green, and yellow for all of our students and lots of different reports. But the point that they want the student to be at is predictive of where they'll be at successfully in first grade rather than just norm referenced. And the way that we present this assessment, it's in a storybook. So it's like we're reading to the child, but you can see the first page is, oh, on this page, I see a clipboard with some different letters, and you go through that. Comprehension, you read a story to the child and you ask inferential and prediction questions after the story. And then there's also a maze task where they're expected to retell and fill in the blanks with some of the missing words on that story. For vocabulary, it also has 2 components, and one of them is just picture naming. So you would show the picture at the top of this page and maybe point to the curtains and say, what are these? And they would tell you curtains. Or what is this? It's a triangle. The second part of that is the tell about section. And for that part, you're looking at the same pictures they've just named, but this time you want them to tell you everything they can about the curtains. So we want them to say, oh, curtains open and shut to bring the light out of the windows, so that we don't see that. We close them at nighttime. And so it measures a lot of different things. They can score 0 to 5 points on that, and it's based on their syntax, it's based on their understanding of the meaning of the word, it's based on if they can put 2 thoughts together. So in just a short little snippet, we can get a lot of information about those vocabulary skills. And the final area is phonological awareness. And so it starts with asking students to segment at that syllable level. So you show them a picture of a teapot, and this is a teapot. What's the first part of the word teapot? And they would have to say tea. And then later on in the task, it's identifying that initial sound. So this is a spider. What sound do you hear at the beginning of spider? Which is the greatest predictor of student success in reading later on. So we really want them to be able to get to that level. We administered this assessment on the same benchmark windows that the rest of the district does for FAST. And then we also wanted to make sure that we were doing a universal screener for math. So IGDs is an assessment that also has a universal screener for reading, but we really like it for math because it does give norms for both our 3 and our 4-year-olds, so we're not missing any of our students there. Again, it assesses 4 different component areas. The first one is simply oral counting. How far can they count? And then it looks at quantity comparison. So you'll see the quantity comparison task there on the screen, and it'll show 2 different dice, and they'll have to point to which one has more. That's a timed task, so it's just how many they can get in that 1 minute. Number naming is a little more complex because it does go from numbers 1 through 20, but again, they have 1 minute to name as many numbers as they can do. And then the final one is one-to-one correspondence. So similar to the dice, you'll see dots on a piece of paper, and we'll want them to do the left-to-right directionality, pointing 1 to 2 to 3, and as high as they can go again in that timed frame. So this is a very quick one to administer, but again, it gives us a lot of different information as how they're performing on those early numeracy skills, and we do it at those same benchmark windows that we do with FAST for the district. Oh, I'm going to turn it back over to Tiffany.
Okay, so the district has an early literacy plan, and we are fortunate to be part of that, a pre-K 3rd grade through 3rd grade plans, and I also get to sit on the committee, so I'm super happy for that opportunity, and just to put the preschool plug in always. So for preschool, the measure of success in our district early literacy plan is the percentage of incoming kindergartners that attended preschool that are proficient on that fall screener. So they're ready to go to kindergarten when they leave us. So that's really our progress measure. And then the high leverage action steps that are outlined in our plan are letters training for our early childhood educators. And actually Stacy is our trainer. She's a trainer for letters. So we have completed that. So our teachers have that background knowledge, and we feel like they are well equipped to teach those early literacy skills. We have monthly early literacy professional developments over the science of reading, very similar to the elementary teachers. We do our CTTs, our collaborative teacher teams, and then we also adopted, or we're going to adopt a curriculum, the 95% phonological awareness kits. We have them, we purchased them through a grant, and we are going to be trained and start that in the fall. In addition to our high leverage action steps, we also had a grant. We purchased intervention kits focusing on vocabulary and oral language, one kit, and then also phonological awareness. So we're able to look at that data from the PELI that Stacy was talking about and really help teachers dive into their data and what students need, how can we group students, and what materials can we use. So we've been really working hard on that this year as well. So the future of preschool and DCSD, like this is what we want. We want 80% of eligible kindergartners to come, and then we want to send 80% of those off ready for kindergarten. So that is our goal, and I think we can get there. Something that we are currently doing, we were awarded the Belief Grant through the state. So this is a planning grant. It's a $10,000 planning grant. So with the help of Nikki Defau and Lisa, we have created a team of district representatives as well as community partners from Community Healthcare, Child Care Resource and Referral, Iowa Reading Research Center. We have a team of people coming together that are going to help assess the needs in our community. So in that grant, we are looking to answer 4 questions. Those 4 questions are, what is the current state of our early childhood learning in our community? And where are the gaps between the needs and the services and the barriers for families? What family service providers must be brought to the table to address these needs? What defines a model early learning center, and what would it cost to implement this program? And what businesses or organizations would be willing to partner and offer that blended early learning? By the end of the summer, we're hoping to submit our findings and for our needs assessment, and that will definitely help move our program in the right direction. We're hoping. It's been clear from the state that they have no implications of future funding to fulfill those needs at this point, but I think it will definitely give us a clear direction to go. Some potential actions that will help reach this goal as well. We're looking to expand our Head Start partnership from currently the 52 slots, potentially up to about 68. That gets a little dicey. Our 4-year-olds, it's definitely well worth it. The 3-year-olds are a challenge just due to our tuition costs based on what Head Start gives us. There's a little bit of gap there. So we're trying to work out. That's why it's a potential action. We're working out those steps. And then also a potential action is a satellite preschool expansion. We know that transportation is a barrier for families, so maybe trying to get some preschools back in those elementary buildings in the community, we feel would impact our enrollment data. Okay, our current kindergartners. So our current kindergartners are currently reporting that 59% of them attended preschool. And right now this data is based on what families check on their online enrollment. So 50% are reporting attending preschool. Of that 59%, only 24% of those kids are on our PAR list. So 76% of them are proficient on FAST by winter. So give those kiddos a semester, the majority of them are ready to go.
I was just going to chime in on that one too. And at our last meeting, you heard Bonnie and Tara and I share that winter FAST data, and the district average was 67% for kindergarten. So the preschool attendees are outpacing the district average as a whole, which is really great news. And I like too that we're looking at winter data, because I think in the fall people went, oh, summer slide, all of these things happen. And so that kind of gives us a good measure of where they were in the fall and then who was able to maintain for winter.
Okay, next we're going to get into some data, and I'm going to put them up on the screen, but I do have them printed for you here in a minute. So this is our current proficiency data from fall to winter for both our 3-year-olds and then our 4-5. So our kiddos that are not 4 by that September 15th cutoff fall in our 3 to 4-year-old assessment, and then we have a separate assessment for 4-5. So as you can see, these are just our proficiency levels throughout the district on each category of that test. And again, similar to FAST, you've heard these benchmarks are moving targets. So our alphabet knowledge is that letter ID, letter identification. In the fall, 4-year-olds only need to know 6. Then it jumps to 17 in the winter, and then it'll be 23 by spring. So that moving target is definitely challenging. This is our literacy data by subgroup. And again, I'll have these given to you. Sure. So again, when we look at this data, I'm just going to set a timer for you to be able to look at it and think about maybe something you notice, something you wonder, and then we'll be able to share out. And then it'll be time for some question and answer.
As she passes that out too, I know in the past you're used to getting those charts that have racial and ethnic groups. They also have ELL students. And just to clarify, this might look like a very slim version of that, and that's mostly due to program regulations. So you are not identified as an English language learner formally at 4 years old, even though we know we have them. Also, the free and reduced lunch, you won't see that data in here because preschool is free for everyone, and we do collect general household income information that allows for all of our students to have free meals, but we don't do that formal free and reduced lunch process. The other data that you've seen in the past would be IEP data, and so as they mentioned too, you have to know that within this group here, 1 out of every 3 kids is currently has an IEP, an active IEP. Okay, so she's going to start a 5-minute timer here, but feel free, you've partnered up in the past, so feel free to do so. You don't have quite as much to look at this time, but hopefully you'll have a chance to look at the all sheet with the 3-4 and the 4-5 with the subtests for literacy from winter, and then also that same level of information for our subgroup data. Oh, and the IEP is actually the last box. I'm sorry, I didn't have my glasses on for that part. Would you like us to pair you up?
I'll come sit over here.
This is the kids in the preschool. This is their testing in the fall, their testing in the winter, and the improvements.
I'm like, they're worse. They're not worse, but as in fewer.
That is significant.
Yeah, that bothered
That's
me.
very significant.
The other thing
Significant.
was that
Significant.
comprehension.
Statistically, probably not significant since a third of the kids are IEP.
Oh, no,
This is not statistically significant, but it's flat.
but it was alphabet knowledge that improved the most for 3 to 4 years.
I wonder what the number
Okay,
is.
I missed that. I hadn't got
How
to it.
many of the
But
kids?
I just noticed what you pointed out about the 3 to 4 year olds didn't like are doing in numbers, but the percentages came to my brain a little bit more.
Yeah, because you look at the percentages, well, there's, what is it in there?
Some of the stuff I was literally doing today, my 3-year-old.
CV West is 256,
And he's like,
and
sees the M.
the other one is 117.
My name starts with an M, and I'm like, no, your name has an M in it.
So there's only 373 total
Does
kids.
this include like the partner agencies like St. Paul
And
and
a
St.
third of
Paul
them.
and?
This is just
So
Davenport.
around 120 are IEP kids.
And I'm like,
Do you track
he goes,
the partners?
"It's on his
Go?
snake."
Okay.
And I said, and what else does this starts with that question?
Oh, that's right.
Snacks.
Right.
Down syndrome. Right. How do you know that we're learning this?
And I'm like,
They're all have a
milk sounds like this.
They're all
What
third
letter is
grade,
that?
3-year-olds,
M. So he like
3 and
knows
4
them.
year olds.
He does it.
Starts with, begin with where they fall.
And also like, yeah, milk. Like
But
he
these
figured
are all
if he
good
thinks about
numbers.
it, he's like, oh, no, that
Composites.
doesn't start with
It-
an S.
What's interesting, it looks like
Where does he go?
He doesn't go to Davenport school. He goes
it looks like you make more progress with 4 and 5s.
over by the Hy-Vee on Eastern Avenue.
Statistically.
Next to my street.
than 3 and 4-year-olds.
You know, that
There's a
east
greater
road,
growth.
it's the east side of that.
I mean, from,
Their driveway is literally across the
yeah,
street from
but it's like it's nine points here,
Okay.
5 points there. This is statistically, but they probably,
It's
they
not
probably don't know
necessarily.
much of the alphabet anyway.
No, it's,
And if you teach
Is it
them
like
the
a
song,
child care?
it's a child
They
care
got
center,
it.
yeah, but they do preschool stuff.
And you know, even homes do that, so it doesn't matter. When you do,
Depending on the home, yes.
well, they're supposed to.
Yeah.
Look at
Did
this,
they
look at
say
the,
why there's no data for race? That one?
We've had better luck with centers because they have a much more.
phonological, that's phonics, that's sounding stuff out.
Anyway,
Maybe a 3-year-old,
Homes are schools sometimes on
they don't know
this.
that. If they don't have alphabetical
Right,
knowledge.
they don't have that.
That's a T, what's a T?
yeah, that's not what
It's a TH. What's that?
so,
No, I had not even
But
got.
comprehension,
well, if you notice, they really
Okay, that was
Then again-
the 3-minute timer. Do we need more time?
have more
no
room.
question, preschool.
No, we're good. Are you guys okay to come back? Okay, yeah.
We never-
And we lost our presentation. I don't know where it went.
My knees still work.
Mine don't.
I don't know
Sometimes.
where it went.
Mine do sometimes.
was
Okay,
gonna
so
say,
now we were just hoping to share some notice and some wonder with the data. So I don't know.
Across the top, do you see where it says,
It's just a substitute,
right, oh, that sucks.
just a substitute teacher one.
And just click into it again.
Uh-oh.
President Gosa, do you want to facilitate the notice and wonder or the question? Thank you.
Yes, I can do that. Director Beck?
So we're just talking about the data right now, is that right? Okay. So Director Hayes and I both noticed right off the bat, if you look at the all preschool by subgroup, that everyone made improvements except for Black or African American students who, that doesn't mean they didn't improve, but as a whole, those students were less proficient after being in preschool for a while, which is not a good thing. And the same thing for 3 to 4-year-olds in their vocabulary or oral language data. They seem to not do as well in the winter as they did in the fall. So.
We're catching all of these in a note catcher too, just in case we don't have the answers right off the top.
The alphabet knowledge that we talked about.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a crazy speaker.
Okay, so Director Hayes reminded me, we also talked about the alphabet knowledge, and that even though for 3 to 4-year-olds, the vocabulary, oral language went down, their alphabet knowledge improved drastically. And kind of wondered, and the comprehension for 4 to 5-year-olds improved drastically, even though everything else kind of moved just a little. So it's almost like the brains at that age were working on slightly different things, maybe, or depending on where they started, right? So,
Do you want us to answer, or we just?
Director Potts or Gordon, you got anything?
Go ahead.
I'll say so.
Thanks.
I got the short straw. The first question I would have, and I think we all need to keep in mind, is what is a statistically relevant shift when you look at growth? I mean, because we look at vocabulary or comprehension from 55 to 77%. That's obviously statistically significant. Most of those are. It begs the question, I'm assuming, we were talking about the alphabetical knowledge of 3 and 4-year-olds. We said, well, of course they learn the alphabet, teach them the song, they got it, Hence the phonological awareness. I'm assuming we don't even try to assess that in the beginning because they don't know the alphabet. Okay, that's a dry hole. I guess the rhetorical question I would have is, beside alphabetical knowledge for 3 and 4-year-olds, growth doesn't appear to be very statistically relevant. I know you don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that, but it's interesting that 3-year-olds, 3 to 4-year-olds, you're not seeing much growth other than memorization of the alphabet. But once they hit 4-year-old, then I'm assuming there's a brain development that takes place where the rest of this stuff can be acquired. At least that was our assumption.
Let me repeat that to make sure I got that right. Besides alphabet knowledge, the 3 to 4-year-old group did not make big gains from fall to winter like the 4 to 5-year-old group.
Mhm.
Is that what you were saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what it says, right there.
Directors Klein, Dromer, Poston.
I do, one thing, Bruce, you said about the alphabet, though, the 3, 4-year-olds are at 64%, but then you look at the 4, 5-year-olds alphabet, it's only 50%. So what happened in a year? Did they forget their alphabet? And,
They're
one thing
concentrating on vowels.
Yeah. We talked about is we wondered how the comparison is to the outside agencies that also offer 4 and 5-year-olds. Are their numbers similar to this?
I'll share for us.
Dan, just
Oh, go ahead.
one other thing, and again, Lisa is probably getting tired of me asking this all the time, but of these kids that are enrolled, what are we looking at attendance-wise? Because again, in my mind, attendance is dramatically going to affect these figures.
Along those lines, when you all present data to us, can you present the attendance data as well? Because I think that plays a huge factor into a lot of this stuff. I don't think some people realize that when their kid misses school and stuff like that, they're setting them behind. One of the things I had asked my partner, so you have the 3 and 4-year-olds and the 4 and 5-year-olds. Are there kiddos that do it at 3rd grade and 4th grade also? Is there do you know the percentage on that? Because I was trying to look at the number from the 3 to 4-year-olds to the 4 and 5-year-olds. Are they transferring over? Because then the 4 and 5-year-olds numbers are less than they were in the winter when they're 3 and 4-year-olds.
So if they're in the 3-4 age group, they take that assessment all year. So that the same students would be in the fall and the winter in that 3-4, and then, but yes, some will return to us again and go to 4-5. I don't know the number that return. Do you know?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but there is a benchmark scores table in the database so that we can look at those scores for the returning students to see if there's a difference.
Are there numbers like are their scores a lot better when they do it the 2 years?
This is my first year here, and I can definitely tell the kids that have been here the 2nd year. They attended the 3-year-old year, and then they're back the 4-year-old year. I can definitely tell whether it's this data or whether it's, in the classroom, just knowing how to do school. Yes.
Okay. And then the other thing was the big jump for the 4 and 5-year-olds in the comprehension. But again, I think like Director Potts said, I think it's where their brains are developing at and what they're working on at those times.
I'm trying to capture your first notice. So you're wondering if the kids that get 2 years of programming with us, as they're either 3-year-olds with an IEP or they're 3-year-old gen ed students who pay tuition, who then come back to the villages for year 4, do they perform at above or below their peers that just do 4-year-old? Is that?
I'm sure they do.
So basically, if they're a 3-year-old and they do the program, and then they come back and do it in their 4-year-old year, are they at what they left at or did they go backwards? That's my question.
Okay. So do they retain it at the end
Yes.
and then come back at 4-year-old and keep?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for those notice and wonders. So now, that is the end of our presentation. So if we have questions, we're also working to have an opportunity. I know you guys got to go to the elementary buildings and see some literacy lessons, so we would definitely like to invite you guys out to Children's Village, and we will have that opportunity coming out soon for you to sign up for a time.
And your questions were very particular this time. Sometimes I can just give you answers right off the top of your head. Sorry, I saw your hand up too. But what I'll do is Stacy and Tiffany can take this back to their BSAT because they have a Children's Village BSAT, also teacher team, and go through and answer these, and then I'll share them with the superintendent to pass on for follow-up. Thank you.
Director Poston, you had a question?
Just a couple things, if it would be all possible. First of all, are there any other community partner sites that have approached you that are interested in, and if so, are there, how many, and is that going to be feasible to bring on some more partners?
Yes, we have had 2 additional approaches this year. So one is just adding a program. They're a current partner site, but they can add another a class of 20 students. And then another site has approached us, and we've had 2 meetings with her just to kind of lay out what that means. I will say the challenge for those sites is always to have a licensed certified teacher, because to be partnered with us and through the statewide voluntary program in Iowa, it has to be a licensed teacher. So sometimes those private sites have a hard time hiring and retaining those teachers.
So that'd be the number one issue. What about the site itself? Is that ever an issue as far as the actual physical structure or the building or anything?
Not this year. Have you had that experience?
No, not this year, but they do have they have to have 35 square feet per child that's going to be there. There can't be more than 20. They have to have, play equipment that allows climbing and swinging and, running space. It has to be fenced. So there are a lot of physical criteria that they do have to meet, but we haven't had an issue with that with their current sites. We have lost partner sites over the last couple of years for what Tiffany talked about. They weren't able to secure a teacher, and so they couldn't sustain, but can always be welcome back. We do have carryover dollars that they can use for those startup costs for that first year.
Is it strictly up to that partner site to find that certified teacher, or does the Davenport Community School District help with that?
They do. We host monthly Zoom meetings with our statewide partners, community partners, and there's learning involved in those meetings, but it's logistics too, like have you turned in your claims, this assessment is due, et cetera. And they do have a chance for like an open forum of sorts where they can reach out to each other and say, hey, I've got a waiting list of this many kids. Do any of you have slots right now? Or I need a teacher for my 3s for next year, or 4s. Do you have any student teachers or people that are looking for employment? So they're their own little group, I suppose, but we don't take a direct role like from an HR point of view, I guess, of helping them find teachers.
Would that be possible at all in order to help with the partner sites?
I think we do unofficially, yeah. And we could probably continue to inquire to see if they're having issues with their staffing. The other thing too, in terms of facilities you were asking, that's been kind of a barrier for some in the past, is they have to have a secure fenced in outdoor play area, which depending on if it's a church or another location, that might not exist. So sometimes that's a barrier for some.
And then just one last thing. Is it possible to have a comparison between the partner sites and the school Davenport Community School sites, both in scores and attendance?
We can definitely dig into that. I know that's something I've done in my past too, because we think of ourselves all as one team with those 14 sites, and so they want their students to be as prepared for kindergarten as we want our students to be, and it creates almost a natural progression of results, right? You're comparing how how your results are at each of your preschools.
Thank you.
Yep.
Director Beck.
So, yeah, I was gonna say, like, I know there are a lot of good childcare centers that aren't part of the Davenport schools. But it sounds like the barriers to that are more than just, having a licensed teacher. So that cleared that up for me. But that brings me to the other question. When students are reporting when parents report whether they've been to preschool or not, that's self-reporting. So it could be any kind of preschool. It doesn't have to be it's not whether they were enrolled in a Davenport preschool or not.
So that's a cleanup that we've done with this year's online registration, and future work is, instead of the drop down, I don't even think there was a drop down, but instead of just asking yes or no on a form you fill out about your child, we're asking where.
Okay.
Because if I went to grandma's house and she did
Yeah.
something preschool with them. Well, that's nice.
That may not
What
be
we're
the
looking
same.
for.
Yeah.
Right. So trying to dig in a little bit deeper, and also to help us know, like, there's a whole lot of kids that are attending, ABC church preschool over here. What can we do to get them on board with us as community partners so they can raise maybe their quality of programming, which in the end benefits Davenport schools because they come to us as kindergartners.
So my follow-up question then, one of the things that's always irritated me about the statewide voluntary preschool programming is that it only pays for half a day. And, I can afford to send my kids to a preschool that's a full-day daycare that does preschool stuff, and that's fine. But the people who can't do that then don't have access to that statewide voluntary preschool, right? So you talked about some are full-day sites, and there's extra grants that can help pay for that. And there's some wrap care. I'm wondering if we are working on wrapping full-day care around a lot of these families. So we get money for half-day preschool or 2 hours or whatever it is for, kids at Children's Village, Hoover, right? Can we not work with a partner like the YMCA? I know they have their own early learning center, but to do the wraparound care. So the kids are KinderCare does its own preschools, but, where kids can go to the voluntary preschool and then they go to some other site for the daycare part of the day, right? Because that's kind of, to me, that's a huge barrier to a lot of families who need preschool or want preschool. Same thing with the ones that end at 2 p.m., right? 2 p.m. is really early.
You're spot on with the funding challenges. It's 10 hours, and most families need 40 hours of daycare or services. And so we try to do full-day programming, which, as you can see, stretches the budget quite a bit. And the other thing that, when you brought that up, that's the whole point of the Belief grant that we're working on, is trying to canvass the Davenport community to find out, are there some natural, like, we're the provider of the school part of it. And then for the other half, transportation is always tricky, but the other, how can we work with the Y or other places that are close to our elementary schools so that we could share children? Maybe they're the daycare piece of it or the licensed teacher piece of it.
Okay.
So hopefully our grant will uncover some things that we all know would help everyone involved.
Yeah.
I think too, I was going to say with the Belief grant, not only do we get to conduct our community needs assessment, but part of that grant and that $10,000 is for travel to outside districts just to see how they do it. How do they provide? So we are looking into right now what sites we might want to go visit and just ask them those questions. How do you provide, or how do you fund those? How do you provide? What do you provide? Kinds of things. So.
Yeah, because it's my understanding that other part of the day doesn't have to be with a licensed teacher. It can be just daycare, right? Okay.
Within with ratios in mind of child to adult and DHS guidelines and safety. And
No, it can't just be all the kids get dumped in a room with one person, but it doesn't have to be the licensed teacher. Yeah.
Director Hayes.
That was sort of my question also, what happens from 2 o'clock on with parents getting off early. You had mentioned 751 students were enrolled, and you're looking to get to 80%, but right now you're at about 50%. With the incoming students that are in pre-K now, in comparison to the kindergarten roundup, do you have any idea what those numbers are?
I do not. No, I do not. I don't know how many of them attended Roundup.
Does the district collect that?
I can answer that,
Okay.
Vice President. Our roundups are historically poorly attended in many parts of our district. I know that my time of enroll, the most I would get would be 30 kids, and we were anywhere from 100 to 75 wouldn't show up for. So roundup it used to be a very good determiner, predictor of what's coming in the fall, and it's changing. It still is in some schools, but it's not a good predictor all the way across the district.
Okay, thank you. You also mentioned 1 in 3 children were in SPED right now. Can you even begin to imagine how that is? It may be COVID or any known factors that could predict that?
I think our 4-year-olds are underrepresented, if that makes sense. So if we had as many 4-year-olds as we want and need, if we were able to say that we were at 80%, then that proportion would be more down to like 20 to 25, which is what most of our elementary schools are running at right now. So I think it's twofold. You have great community services and intervention services that are finding these kids that need support, but the average 4-year-old that should be with us but isn't because of transportation or you name it, isn't there. And so then that makes it look more proportionally. It throws us off, and it throws our classrooms off, to be honest, too, when you're trying to do peer modeling and other things. You want what is more of a typical balance, which would be, I don't know, Kim, off the top of my head, what is it now nationally? Yeah.
I would just add to that too. Remember, the majority of those are at Children's Village West or Children's Village Hoover, but they come from all over the district. So if they were spread out in as many buildings as we have the district, the percentage wouldn't look that big. So for instance, right now we're in the process of doing kindergarten transition meetings for our special education students. So tomorrow we have 6 meetings at Jefferson. So 6 of those students are Jefferson. It's not as large, you know what I mean? They'll just spread out. 5 today we're at Truman. So it's just because they're so concentrated too that number is such a high percentage.
Okay.
And I will say too, a lot of those students that are newly identified are 3s, so their birthdays are just coming around and they're turning 3s, and our AEA is doing a nice job of identifying those students and bringing them in. And I think that COVID does play a factor. We're seeing a lot of nonverbal students, a lot of students that haven't had that exposure in the community with the rest of their families. So we are definitely seeing some of that barrier, especially with the vocabulary and just that oral language, them speaking.
Okay, thank you.
Director Kleindrum?
Right now, could we accommodate more students in these programs, or are we now at the max with the teachers we have and the space we have, or?
It's a loaded question. We have a few open seats, I would say, but like we said, with those students that are identified through the AEA, we have to take those kiddos. So we do reserve spots in each classroom for special education. So currently our program, I would call it full, even though each class isn't at the 20 mark. We do have to save some of those seats.
And do we have any buildings out there that next year could start a preschool? I know putting 6th graders in there really threw this all off, but are there some that have some space?
We do. I have talked to some principals that do have a space that would be have adequate space, that has access to a restroom, things like that. So it would be, if our enrollment in that community would allow it and we would find a teacher for it, there are some places that do have space, yes.
So we really aren't out there recruiting students to come to our preschool because we don't have space for them anyway.
Not for this year. For next year, we are. We have started recruitment for next year.
And how do you recruit kids? I mean, just, oh, your brother went here, your sister went there, or how do we reach people who don't have a connection to our buildings?
That's one other thing that we added to the registration questionnaire, which is tell us the name and birth date of any other children living in your home between the ages of 0 and 5, I think, or 0 and 4. And so they, I have Emily, and she was born in 2019. So then in Infinite Campus, that's our database manager. So we can run queries and see how many kids are that have siblings in our system right now could potentially be coming into our 4-year-old programming because they turn 4 by September 15th. So those, without that data, it's, we're just going on our incoming kinder numbers and hoping that that's right. But this is kind of a nice quality check on that, I think, moving forward. And we do know that there are around 5 or 6 schools that have space that could do a preschool classroom, just because they had the space prior to us having to close some of the programs. So it's a matter of, and if Kevin was here, he could probably explain it better, but we're not getting the dollars for them until after we've counted them. So the preschool budget has to be able to front load the cost of the teacher and the other expenses prior to those kids being on the count the year before. So when we bring on new partners in the community or we open up new sections, you have to have a healthy enough budget to be able to get that off the ground, which is a challenge right now for us. We're using quite a few funding sources to stay afloat.
And who oversees Head Start? Does the district oversee it, and why would I choose Head Start over a Davenport preschool?
So we do have a Head Start liaison, and of those spots, they are in our preschools. So the 52 currently, you wouldn't know them from any other kid if you walked into Children's Village West. So they are in there. It's just
Okay.
our Head Start liaison, her name's Rachel. She recruits them from their Head Start waiting list. She registers them and kind of hand delivers them to our classes. So that is the benefit of having that partnership with Head Start.
Oh, they're not a separate program or place?
They do have separate throughout the community, like there are Head Starts that are partners, but the ones that are contracted through us, they come to our sites.
Yeah, and Head Start has a very large waiting list, so they're always, they don't have enough spots in their own spots, so they're always able to fill our spots as well. As far as recruitment too, last year we split the Davenport into 4 quadrants, and teachers spent several PD days. I identified gas stations, churches, dentist's office, doctor's office, and they went out and they put up flyers. They went down to the farmer's market, every week for a couple of months. They went to all the elementary schools, at drop-off time, and passed out flyers as parents were going through the pickup line. So we've done a lot of recruitment efforts over, certainly the last couple of years. We do. Usually the city of Davenport will have an event at Fedgeway Park in the summer and for just families, and so we've brought flyers over there as well. Just a lot of different things like that.
And then my last question is, you are relying right now on $600,000 in ESSER money. I understand you have to have the bodies in order to get the funding. What's the exit plan so that you aren't relying on ESSER, because in a year or two, that can't be what hires these teachers, and yet you got to get the bodies in there. It's like you can't catch up to what you need. So what's the exit plan on that?
I think it's twofold. One is just increasing in general the number of 4-year-olds we have, which will increase the general funding source for it. And secondly, we're doing some deep dives into our special education model and how we're providing services to kids, so that hopefully in the future we can be more efficient and more financially. Some of the things that the preschool budget is paying for are possibly not general or special education expenses. And so we're really working as a team. We're talking about it this morning again at Cabinet, about digging into that budget and finding ways to look at our costs and look at our expenses so that we can live without ESSER down the road.
And also, we didn't know until late in the year that we were going to have ESSER funds. So certainly we spent a lot of time with our budget specialist and previous principal, working out different scenarios of how we would be able to ensure to have as many spots possible. So it's not like we haven't done a lot of the research on a lot of different models to see what we could do. It's just we are fortunate to have it now, so hopefully we'll continue to expand. So by the time it does run out, we'll have some more of our own revenue in there as well.
I think our two biggest philosophical questions we're asking ourselves are, can we be a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old program, knowing that the 4-year-old program is the state-funded program? And can we do full-day programming for kids when we know the state only gives us funding for 10 hours per week? And so our families' needs and our students' results tell us that we need a 3-year-old program and we need full-day programming, but our budget tells us differently. So we have to find a happy medium somewhere between all of those factors.
Do you do 5 days a week then? Do some of our community sites only do 4? And just
Directors Gordon or Potts, do either of you have questions?
She said mine, so.
No? Okay. Director Beck?
I guess my one other follow-up question would be, what is the possibility of, rather than thinking of partnering with sites, if full day care is an issue, finding sites and make the teacher mobile, right? So that, the teacher is going to those sites rather than the kids going to the preschool. Does that make sense? I don't know, just another way to think about it.
No, we've considered that. One of our partner sites currently is having a really hard time finding a teacher for next year. So that's definitely something that we're considering, and just the mutual, the benefit of it. So just kind of weighing that out, like what good would it do them to have our teacher to come there, just to kind of utilize their classroom. So we're working out some of those things.
And I guess my last thing would be, I don't know how other board members feel, but if we have the physical space and we can find the teachers, I would like to see us put a preschool in all those places that we have the room, the ability to do so. I think that's something we've talked about in the past, and, COVID happened, but now's the time to get that.
To piggyback off what you're saying, we 3 years ago, we looked at all the data of where our incoming preschoolers are coming from and where they're not coming from, and we purposefully planted preschools in the areas where the partner sites, the students weren't enrolling, and we attempted the model that we think is sustainable, and then COVID hit and we moved the 6th graders back down. So our biggest issue with making it sustainable right now is the notion of space. And there's also a mind shift that needs to occur. If we're going to put preschools in every building and have a satellite sites, then the buildings need to own those preschools, because it's incredibly difficult for Tiffany to be everywhere in Stacy. So the conversations that we're having, we know that we can't go back to where we were, where we had preschool from birth to 5, and it utilized 65% of our Title I budget. But we also know that we have to set the standard of what's sustainable, because we have a wonderful opportunity with ESSER to front load, and it's a great investment. We know it is. The data is there, and we have years of data to support that. And so I'm really excited. I think what you've heard is that there's what works inside of our district is when we have a committee and a system. So you heard the team talk that there's now a preschool team. The problem with the preschool is it's Title I, special ed, early childhood. So there's going to be a lot of people sitting around the room. And so we've got to determine the funding source and then the programmatic issues. But that team needs to meet regularly and then set the course. And then eventually we will bring a recommendation to the school board that this is how we're going to move forward with preschool. because right now we're kind of piecemealing it all over. So, but I definitely see the direction that we're heading. It's sustainable. Long-range facility planning is going to play a huge role into that, because I believe that our team knows where the pockets are to fill in around our sites.
I'll just add a little bit to that too. Certainly that's everybody's vision would be to have that too, but that's part of the problem our budget is where it is because we expanded so rapidly, but we never filled all those spots, so we have to be very strategic about making sure we have full enrollment to support a program there, because some of our neediest buildings, we've had programs there for multiple years, and we did the wraparound care where it was just paras in the afternoon, so it was full day, and maybe we'd have like 6 to never above 10 families enroll. So wow. Yeah, so we just have to we just really have to make sure we have those numbers as we're expanding to make sure we're budget friendly.
Okay. Recruitment.
I think everyone's asked their questions. On your recruitment part, I would recommend getting banners made, put them at every school, and in the parks. I'm sure we can ask the city about that, because families will be taking their kiddos to the park. I do it for Little League every year, and I get a ton of kids signing up. I mean, I put it all around town in my area, and it's like that. So I would recommend doing something like that, and then the banners can be used every year. It's cheap, and it'll bring in a lot of kiddos and stuff, because some parents might not know about it. I know we got emails about it for our kid going to Fillmore, and then we would get things about it. So, and having other kids in the district. But I want to get back to the positive part of it. I appreciate the data, because that's what we were here for, the discussion, not me to tell you how to get kids or do your program or anything like that. I do like seeing all the progression that the kiddos are making from when they started, from in the fall to the winter. So I think that's all positive on that. I agree. I wish we could have them in every classroom or every building. That would be great. But again, you got to be able to house them and have all the kiddos to fill that room. My question is, and we only get funded for the for like the half-day preschool, but then some of our partner sites, they do full day, but it's free as well. So how is the difference in that? And I do know this because I did sign my kid up a couple years ago, and it's pretty expensive to do. I think I was paying $125 a week or something, or a month, something like that. When I could have sent my kid to JFK and not paid at all. I'm just curious about that.
I really can't speak to their overall budgets. We only see the expenditures that they submit to us for the reimbursement for the $3,000 plus per child. My guess is it's scholarships or parishioner funding or grants. Maybe there are scholarships that they offer their families that help drive down the cost. Somebody's probably paying for it somewhere, I'm guessing, along the way. And the return on investment, I'm guessing, is if you get them in your preschool, then they are more likely to stay in your building because they get attached, which is what we would like to do too.
Yeah.
Keep them.
Yeah, just to echo that, I know a lot of the privates do have scholarships for families, but as part of the desk audit, we've had to review all their handbooks. So I'm 95% sure they all had fee scales in there for the majority of the families for that other portion of the day. So I think that they're charging for the majority of the families. But I don't know. Maybe if you know more about that, we can find ways to provide scholarships as well.
I would rather we fund preschool in our buildings instead of to our competition, because essentially we pay for them at preschool and then they just keep them. I don't understand why we do that. I know it's the way that the funding mechanism works and all that, but it just seems like you're trickling public dollars into private education early on. But anyway, that's my personal opinion. I'm not talking for any board member. That's just me. But again, I thought it was a great presentation. I appreciate y'all spending some time with us to go over that. And then I will look forward to seeing what the data looks like next year for those kiddos. Hopefully we just keep going up and up. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is an update from a board request on guest teacher pay. So Jamie's going to give us a brief presentation on that early childhood theme. Thank you very much. It was a great interaction. More to come.
I was trying to give them a minute to get up and stuff, but that's cool. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Jamie, we've reviewed the board request, and Jamie is going to give us an update where we are, where we stand with our neighbors. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. So I don't know who has the clicker. You do?
Can you pull it closer?
I said I don't know who has the clicker.
I have.
You do? Okay, thank you. All right, so we can start off. The board request was looking into the teacher compensation. So this presentation will have some compensation information in it. There is also some information about retention. So for the first slide is what the surrounding districts do, what they pay for their substitute teachers. Bettendorf, North Scott, and PV all have an agreement to pay the same. So you'll see a licensed and authorized substitute. Their rate per day is $120. At 45 days or more, it becomes a long-term assignment, and they still receive $120 a day, but the districts provide 5 sick days and bereavement for an immediate family member. Then it jumps up to $150 a day for a retired teacher and for a nurse. And then if you want to go to the next slide, I can show you what ours is. Ours are. For the Davenport district, licensed and authorized substitute teachers get $129 a day, so that's $9 more a day than the other districts. And then for long-term substitute teaching, that is at 20 days for the same teacher. And once you do a long-term assignment, that rate goes up to $173 a day. One thing that hadn't been allowed in the past that the BOEE is occasionally approving is a long-term substitute assignment with a sub-authorized teacher. So to step back, there are 2 types of substitute teachers. One is a sub-authorization, and a sub-authorization requires an associate's degree or 60 credits towards an associate's degree. And then you can go through some training and receive that authorization through the BOEE. And then licensed substitutes are those that are licensed teachers. So that's why you tend to see a difference in the rates. It's based on these authorized versus licensed substitute teachers. To go back to the 20-day long-term assignments, due to the lack of guest teachers, the BOEE on a couple occasions this year has approved a long-term assignment utilizing a sub-authorized person. So in those 2 circumstances, we followed the same logic for the long-term assignment rate of $173 since it was approved by the BOEE. And then for retired teachers and nurses, we're at $173 a day. Go ahead. You click one more on the cost. So I had Lisa Cruz pull some numbers on the salary costs over the last few years. For fiscal year 2019 to 2020, we almost spent $1.5 million in sub costs. Last year was lower because of COVID, but still a fairly significant cost to the district. And then right now, from the beginning of 2021 through March, we're at about $1 million. So at the bottom there, looked at what it would potentially cost to increase the rates. It's a bit challenging because there's different sub assignments put into our ASAP system that they can go out and select. So it's a bit challenging to determine how what type of sub, the $129 sub-authorized sub or the $173 a day license sub, so to actually determine what an actual increase would cost. But just 3% to using the 2019-2020 data, because it's more applicable since we haven't finished a full year this year and last year was COVID, that it would be $43,748 just applied to the salary. Now, I got some additional information on the FICA and IPERS. For a 3% increase, that would be an additional $6,000 added. And then 4% would be your $58,331 plus $8,100 for FICA and IPERS. And then a 5% would be your $72,913 with almost $10,000 in FICA and IPERS. All right, if you want to go from there.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
I'm really sorry, I missed the first slide. The one with the neighboring districts, is that an average of all three?
Nope, they all three pay the same. They
Okay.
have like a mutual agreement,
Okay.
so they're not competing with one another.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, we can move on. And so this year with our absenteeism, we put together a substitute teacher initiative. And so there was what I called a task force that included representative from the DEA, we had building administrators, ILDs, Director of Learning and Results, HR, to start off seeking feedback on how to resolve the issues with attendance and substitute teacher shortage. We also then went out and opened up a survey for some teachers to put their thoughts and comments on ways that we could help with that. In addition to that, with needing more substitute teachers, I worked with Mike Vondren at TAG and did some social media advertising. He got me hooked up with some media outlets to do some interviews, and we've hired 74 substitute teachers through this initiative, and it's kind of climbing every day. So every day or so I'm getting one or two new guest teachers. And then for the retention piece, as part of this initiative, we did a satisfaction survey. It was placed on ASAP, and it is still out there. So you want enough to have some statistical significance. So it's been out there for about a couple months, and we've had 56 substitute teachers complete it. I did notice they're still actively completing it. I also asked Shelley we have to frequently go in and move it to the top of the messages because it falls down as it's in the system longer. So if you want to proceed, Brenda. And one more. All right, so these were some basic questions to kind of see how our guest teachers were feeling in the district. So the first question, how long have you been guest teaching? And you can see a lot of people have been here for a significant period of time. So over half of them have been subbing in the district for 5 or more years. You can see 3 to 4 years, 1 to 2 years, and then about 13% is less than 1 year. Next slide. The next question was, my experience guest teaching at the district has been positive, and 91% had yes, with a 9% no. Next question, or next slide, please. And then please rate your satisfaction as a guest teacher. You can see 25% was excellent, 30.4 was good, great, 33.9 was good, and then we had a percentage, about 9% at 2, and a very small amount at poor. Let me get into the next slide. Okay. So then based on that, start digging into the reasons why people were dissatisfied. So like classroom directions and daily lesson plans are readily available for when I arrive for my assignment. So you can see 34% strongly agreed, about 45% agreed, and then there was the neutral range, so that's a good sign. I find it easy to accept assignments for substitute teaching. We have the ASAP system. The vast majority of people know how to go in, and it's something that Shelley goes through as the guest teachers are coming in as an onboarding piece to show them how to use the ASAP system. Next slide. Other teachers are willing to help me if I need them. You can see a lot of positive feedback there as far as strongly agree and agree. Next slide. An administrator checks on the classroom when I substitute teach. You can kind of see that's where we have some room for improvement. And that was some open-ended question feedback is at other districts, they'll have people pop in and check on them, and they said that helps with the classroom because they have that sense that the principal is watching them and know that there's a guest teacher there. Next slide. I'm treated with respect by the faculty and staff, another positive response to that question. Next slide. I'm treated with respect by students when I substitute teach. This is where you see the most divide in responses is on the student behavior that day. I think that's where the administrator coming in to check on the class would help change some of those numbers. And then next slide, I generally feel safe. 51% or 52% said yes. We got some neutral. And then the disagree, I think some of that just goes down to, in some of the open-ended feedback questions, is letting people know who your first responders are within the building. So some of this feedback will be going back to the buildings on just some things to consider for our guest teachers to improve the satisfaction. Just knowing the PBIS procedures, knowing who to call if you have an issue. I know some buildings are good at doing that, where when you check in for your assignment that morning, they have a folder for you with all that information. We just need to make sure that's happening at every building. Next slide. And then on average, how many days per week do you substitute teach? And you can see it's all over the place. Most of the respondents prefer to take assignments at buildings that are next to their homes. That's convenient for them. Or they retired from a certain building. We have a lot of retired teachers that are still subbing for us. And there's that loyalty to the buildings they retired in. So, and next slide, I believe there was a lot of information there, but just wanted to show primarily where we were in relation to the other districts in our pay.
Director Kleindro.
I have several things. Number one, the amount we're paying for people to sub during their prep. I mean, I truly believe if you're giving up your prep subbing, you should get paid. But how much it has gone up this year, and we're not even at the end of the year when April, May goes even higher, it is alarming how much is out there. Way back in the day when I subbed, and it was different. Somebody actually called me on the phone. I couldn't pick or choose. But if I didn't say no like 20 times, then I went to the higher rate. Now I know with ASAP it would be, or the system you use, it would be different because you wouldn't know if I didn't click it or not. But is there some way to reward people who, they put in 20 days, but it may not be for the same teacher?
Right.
And I don't know how that would work with the system you use now versus the system where if I picked up and then I said no, then I went back down. And
It would take that's something I would have to look into because I think it would take a lot of manual work or some way to see if ASAP has the programming to be able to trigger that or report out on that.
yeah, it just may be an incentive. I can work my way up. I may not have to do the same person all the time, but just a thought. And I also, this is going to go back to the administrators. No lesson plans, unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. And they have to be in those classrooms and say, how are things going? When I taught, I always, if there was a sub next to me, I always stopped and made sure. My grade level team always went to the person, checked on them before school, during the day, anytime I could. But I'm not going to lay this on a teacher. Administrators have to get in there. And if I show up and there are no lesson plans, they need to be addressed when they come back because that's not for the sub to have to figure it out.
Right.
Director Beck.
Shoot. Go with Director Gordon. I just totally lost my train of
Director
thought.
Gordon.
Okay, I have several questions, but I want to start off by saying thank you for putting this together. This is informative and helpful. However, it's missing some information that I am interested in. I see that you have put in the costs of the substitute salary, but that it doesn't indicate when the last raise for substitutes was, which was one of my original questions.
I haven't been here long. I mean, since I've been here, there hasn't been one. I do not know.
Okay.
Last time.
Okay. So I look at those figures for the salaries and I assume that that's the whole bucket for all of the substitutes. That's what we're paying in a year, or that's what it would cost to increase that for 1 year for a pool of substitutes.
That would be assuming that we use the 2019-2020 data as somewhat of a normal year, and applying an increase to that, because it would be very challenging to determine how often somebody making 129 versus 173 is subbing to get an actual real cost.
Sure. So, knowing that, I know that, 43,000 to 72,000, or, plus the 6,000 to 10,000 for FICA and IPERS, it's a big chunk of change. But I also want to say to my fellow board members, it's not unmanageable. If we can pay one ILD more than that entire cost, I think we could make a way to find that money to show our subs appreciation, and that they're valued and that we want them in this district. And that's not to say that any of our ILDs aren't worthy and deserving of that money. You guys are. You're doing a fantastic job. It's just the point of, if we want people to stay here and keep coming back to the district, we need to put our money there and we need to show them that they're appreciated and that we want them. So my next question then was on slide 8, when you said that you did the substitute teacher initiative and you had established the task force and you had sought feedback, and here, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you were just seeking feedback from the DEA principals, ILDs, and the director of learning and results, but not the teachers themselves?
No, I said we did solicit feedback from the teachers. So
Okay, I missed
they
that.
were able to put in, we sent a link out to everybody saying, please put any thoughts, ideas. There's no such thing as a bad idea. So it was open up. There was a lot of feedback that went into that, but it gave an opportunity to the building administrators to send that out to their teams to get the actual teacher feedback.
Okay, I apologize for misunderstanding that. I think that's actually all of my questions. Thank you.
Director Beck.
So I remembered, but the first one actually arises out of that. When you say give feedback, were the substitute teachers able to give feedback as well?
So that's the satisfaction survey.
Okay.
So that is what it's been open for a couple months, and I'll continue, because as we hire new guest teachers, we're going to want them to fill it out. So that is, there were a lot of open-ended questions. It would take me a long time to go through all of those, but there was a lot of feedback in those open-ended questions too.
I might recommend, instead of just keeping it up indefinitely, because people start to get, oh, I've seen that, or I've already done that, putting it up, taking it down, putting it up quarterly or something like that, so that anybody who hasn't done it yet can do it. So my other thought was, it'd be interesting to see, compared to, especially the question about administrators checking in and the students respecting the teacher, the sort of two negative things. It'd be interesting to see how that compares if we could ask the same question of our full-time teachers, right? Because I wonder about the student respect one especially. We all know the stereotype of the substitute teacher getting zero respect. It would put it in context, I think, if we could see the
And there's-
same thing for a full-time teacher?
I have, yes, absolutely. And then when it comes down to some of those yes, no type questions, some of the open feedback questions it does lend into age groups. So your maybe junior high versus your high school kids are a little bit more mature, or I retired from elementary school, I prefer this one, or this building has better classroom management, I prefer being there. So there's a lot of detail into the results that we received.
Okay, so some of them are very specific to that individual's preferences or personal experience. Okay, all right. Thank you very much for putting this together.
No problem.
Director Potts?
You hit on something, just said something that I was running through my head. It'd be interesting to see a breakdown of the substitute teachers. You know, they tend, my recollection is that they tend to either do elementary or they do high school, and if they have to,
They'll do junior
they
high.
do junior high.
And that's what the data does show.
Yeah, I would assume that. Yeah, yeah. One of the things we used to do, like if you subbed it, we did Popcorn Fridays, and if you were sub Popcorn Friday, you got a free bag of popcorn. You got a free bag of popcorn. And I honestly, I had subs that would come to the building on Friday. That, you know, obviously they came not just because we had good popcorn, but it just little things like that for a sub. You know. I let it go first in the lunch line. I do whatever he had to do.
Yeah.
You know.
Welcome and happy.
Some of those pens.
So I'll tell a story. I think a lot of it comes down is how you're treated, how are you respected when you walk into a building. I was in a building the other day, it started the day. Guest teacher walked in. The secretary said, "Oh, we're so glad you're here. You're subbing for Mr. Goes' room. There was a clipboard with a key on it, the instructions, there was a map for the building, instructions, and all the things necessary for that guest teacher on a clipboard." And you could just tell it just made the guest teacher at ease. And so I think that there are things like Karen was talking about that we can ensure that we do. We check on them. We make sure things are okay. And that will really improve our return rate. So there are excellent examples across the district, and we have done all different kinds of things to try and cover subs and attract people. And to your point, we have made a building a priority because they don't get subs, and so we fill that building first. And I'll never forget, I had a human being in kindergarten who only does auto shop, and he's like, "Listen, I'm gonna be here till noon, but after that it's you, and I'll never come back here." And so, you know, when you do things like that, then you don't have a sub in auto shop and kindergarten. And so I think there's a way to get it dialed in, and this report really helps turn the lights on with it too. So thanks for putting it together.
Director Hayes or Posh, you got anything? No? My question is, I think you said right now we're like around $1 million in our substitute fees. And I want to say years past, don't we always wind up averaging almost 2 million or something?
Probably. Finance provided me with the last 3 years, but also remembering that first year COVID hit one February, March timeframe. And then last year was a full COVID year. And then this year is a regular year. So it's trying to find that balance. It very well could be that it was over $2 million in the past.
The numbers that stick out in my mind are 1.6 to $2 million, and it really doesn't start, like Director Kleindrom said, it really doesn't start ticking until about right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll notice your numbers seem really good, and now is the time
It's getting warmer out.
when things start unfortunately ticking up in that direction. So,
Get warmer out. People get sick a little more when it's warm out.
Mm-hmm.
when you gave the percentages, so what's a 3% on the 129? Do you know?
Yeah. Let me go back to my. So if we based it on like $1.5 million, a 3% with FICA and IPERS would be about $50,000.
So what is that? What would their daily pay? What would
Like
that
go up a
equate to? Do
dollar
you
or
have
two?
It would go up about 3%
So it'd be like
to the 120,
130 or
129 and 173.
$3 or $4.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's at 129 now. So if it went up, it would go up a couple bucks.
Yeah.
And all the other districts are at 120.
Yes.
So then we should have like the mark on.
And I think we do based on when working with TAG, when we, part of our strategy was putting our hourly rates on our media, and that did drive a lot of interest.
Would you be able to get me the board so the 3% increase is $50,000 to the whole thing. Would you be able to break that down on how much it would be for each one of those?
Sure thing.
Director Klein, Jerome?
Is our hiring process the same as the other three districts? I mean, do they have to go through, like I used to have to do bloodborne pathogens, the end of story, but that's not the way it is now. There's lots of videos you have to watch and lots of training and sign off. Are we all the same though? Are we asking more than the others?
Yes, but not to use that. The other districts are starting to look into the compliance piece. So I imagine with some of the questions I've received from those other districts that they'll be putting some additional compliance training as part of their efforts. One thing we did try and do to get people in faster was we offered to let them come in and complete the training and we would pay them. We did not get a lot of response to that. People preferred just to do it on their own time. And I think that's just the nature of substitute teaching. They just wanted that flexibility of doing it when they wanted to.
So the others aren't in compliance with what is required? Or it appears that way?
It appears that way
Okay.
in some cases. Can't speak to them, but we are following.
in
the-
compliance.
We are in compliance.
Okay.
Director Beck?
So I like what you mentioned about the hourly rates, that drove more interest. I think that's how you make a shift in terms of public perception, because I can totally see somebody saying, I'm going to substitute in one of those districts because I hear this about Davenport. But then you find out you can make quite a bit more, and we're in compliance with all of the rules. Not that the others aren't, but I think that's the way. You may not, it drives more interest. Maybe not everybody bites, but it gets more of that attention. And then you start to filter out, oh, no, actually in Davenport they pay this much. And,
And the kids are good. There are good classes. There are good schools. And that is some of the open positive feedback that the feedback in the open-ended questions. So it is nice that they enjoy coming to the district. They enjoy our kids. Sometimes it just comes down to the different age groups and what they prefer and their loyalties.
Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation. See how I let her get up before I moved on?
I wrote it down.
All right, we'll go with board reflections. We'll start on this side of the room with Director Gordon.
I'm real thankful for both of the presentations tonight. The preschool one was very informative. I was unaware that we had such a large presence in the preschools, and I did not know that about all the partner schools that we partner sites, I mean. So that was really interesting, and it was good to see that data of how well the preschool environment goes for their reading and number understandings as they enter into kindergarten. And also thanks to Jamie for the substitute teacher presentation and all that information. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Potts.
I thought of particular interest to me was the difference in the growth rates from the 3-4-year-olds and the 4-5-year-olds. The statistically significant greater growth in the 4 and 5-year-olds on the chart.
Thank you, Director Pace.
I enjoyed both of the presentations. However, with the preschool one, that one really interests me. Basically, if you're interested in sending your kids to preschool, you can go about anywhere. You know, they're in different areas of town, so you can pick a close location. And it just seems like there was something offered in the presentation that would basically fit the needs of everyone that was wanting to go now. It sounds like there weren't like a huge waiting list to get in, and even with the spaces that were available, I like that aspect of it because you never know what could happen from day to day. And if someone that's really struggling needed to get into preschool, from a recommendation from AA, that there was a slot available that they could get in and receive the assistance that they needed.
You still had your mic. I don't know. All right, thank you. Director Klein-Jerome.
I also appreciated both presentations. The funding source on preschool was interesting. I didn't realize that they had so many different funding sources. And, you know, this is a state of Iowa issue. We have to take the special ed kids, but if they're not there October 1st, we're taking them without the money. And, you know, this is not something we can fix. But it would be nice if the state would fix that issue because, yes, we should take them, and we do take them, but the money does not come with them as well. So I think that's an issue, but both of them were good presentations.
Thank you, Director Poston.
I also enjoyed both presentations. A couple things on the preschool data. Under the 4 and 5-year-old data, the under comprehension, showing just a huge improvement. I think that was kind of eye-opening. And then just the thought about a third of the preschoolers being special ed students. So, and then I also, like Karen said, did not realize that there's that many funding sources for the preschool.
Thank you, Director Beck.
Yeah, it was interesting. The preschool literacy data was interesting. My 3.5-year-old is doing a lot of those things right now. And so it was really cool to be able to see the connection and, you know, really understand what's going on. I had no idea that there were that many funding sources for preschool either. That is a lot of things to make fit together, a lot of pieces for one puzzle. But I'm impressed with how we've managed to make it work. And it is great to see that in almost every case, students are growing and that our data show that students who do attend a preschool are less likely to have some of the negative events that would prevent them from graduating on time down the line. I guess negative events isn't really the right word, but things that would prevent them from graduating on time down the line.
Thank you, Superintendent Schneckloff.
For me, preschool has been, over the last 10 years, all over the map. You know, we keep reinventing it. And a Gary Sinclair line fits perfectly with early child. We can do anything we want. We just can't do everything. And so we have to decide what it is that we believe in and then go make that sustainable. Because the unpredictability of that is really tough for families. And so the thing that is most excited me tonight, and it was obscure, but you heard Lisa say, well, we've got a team and we're starting to meet, and that's what's going to make it sustainable. That's what's going to make it very clear. And it is difficult because you have to braid those funding sources to make it work. That's the most exciting part about, because we know that works. We have wonderful preschool teachers. I can't wait for you guys to go in the preschools. If you haven't been in one, you're going to love it, and you're going to want to immediately give them all raises, because the preschool it's a very unique environment, beautiful environment. And I'm very excited for that to be stable, for us to know exactly what we are as a district and what we believe in, and kind of reset that. So that was the part that excited me the most from the meeting.
Could I just say something? You are absolutely right when you think about our preschools and how we have popcorned all over the place. It used to be they were a full year, and teachers were on different schedules in order to accommodate all that, and then suddenly we cut that out, and then we had them in the buildings, and then we took them out of the buildings, and we do need to have a plan and work that and quit changing everything.
Totally.
You didn't even give me a chance to say no. I'll let you have my reflection.
Okay, I'll do it.
I thought both presentations were great. I always love seeing where we're at with our scores and everything, and where the data's telling us we're at. I appreciate the one on the guest teachers too, because when I was coming up through the district, I had a lot of great guest teachers during my tenure. So, and we are always the model classes for all of our guest teachers.
Sure, yeah.
Always. Just don't ever go ask any of them. All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. 5-minute break, and then I'll do the other one.
Are we staying in here?
Maybe we should take these mics too, so